Hi boys and girls, this is Mr. Slates coming to you, and today we are going to start Logic of English Lesson 5. Can you believe it? We've already made it to Lesson 5. So we're going to review a rule again this week to begin with, because this is a pretty important rule for what we're doing for today. So, think in your head, what does this rule tell me about English words? Maybe in your classroom right now, someone should raise their hand and tell everyone, what does this tell me about English words? I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, the rule is English words do not end in I, U, V, or J. Can you say that? English words do not end in I, U, V, or J. That's pretty important for our sounds from last week, and our sounds from this week are almost the same. So check out our sounds. These are our new sounds for this week. What do you notice about both of these phonograms? Do you notice they both have an A at the beginning? Do you see that? What do you notice that's different? Yeah, one ends in a Y, one ends in an I. And I'm actually going to switch it, because this will help us when we think about our rule. Let me put up the blue rule. So, think about it. Which one of these cannot be at the end of English words? This one. But why? Why can this one not be at the end of English words? Because it ends in I. Now let me give you these sounds. Both of these go A. Can you say that? A. It's the long A sound. This is A that we may not use at the end of English words. This is two-letter A that may be used at the end of English words. So I want us to get into the habit of saying all of those things so that it will help us to remember. Does that make sense? So everyone say two-letter A that may not be used at the end of English words. Now say two-letter A that may be used at the end of English words. Now let's be clear. Just because this can be used at the end of words does not mean it will never be in the middle or at the beginning. But what's clear is this one can never, ever, ever be at the end. So, I'm going to attach those sounds to my ring, and let's do a review. Okay? You ready? Say A that we may use at the end of an English word. Say two-letter A that we may not use at the end of English words. Okay, back to review, so you should know these. You ready? Say the sound. Two sounds. R-controlled, isn't it? I'll help you. Say E, A. Nice. Sound. From last week, say oi that we may not use at the end of English words. Say two-letter oi that we may use at the end of English words. Okay. Do you see how the ois are very similar to our new sounds, the A's? They're like friends or like partners. When the A needs to be at the end of a word, it's typically going to be this one. When the A is somewhere in the middle or the beginning, it many times is this one. Let me tell you our goals today, okay? Our goals are up here. I want us to learn about what we call the broad vowel sound. And then we're going to learn specifically about the broad A. Now, do you notice every time I come to you, we keep going back to the vowels, don't we? And it's because the vowels are that important in English. Without a vowel, we would not have a word. You have to have the vowel because your mouth opens. You can't say words with your mouth closed the entire time. That would be ridiculous, right? So, let's take a look at our vowels. We're going to start with our A. Can you remember the sounds? A, right? A, like father. Okay, let's mark our vowels, how we remember to mark them. Does anyone remember how we mark our short vowel sound, our first sound? Think of Mrs. Olson's class trick. It's the smiley, right? Ah. So I'm going to put my smiley over the top of that first vowel. How do I mark my long vowel? Do you remember my mouth? A. I mark it with a line, right? Now, we have not talked about that third sound yet. It actually has a name. It's called the broad sound. Now, broad means wide. I really don't know how that's going to help you, though, when it comes to the marking. Let me tell you what the marking is, okay? Can you see that way back there? I just drew two little dots over the top of the A, like the eyes of a smiley face. Whenever a vowel makes its broad sound, we can mark it with two little dots over the top. And that means it's its third sound. So if you're somewhere and you notice that someone has marked an A with the smiley, you know the word is supposed to say the A sound, the short sound. If there's a line, you know it's the A sound. And if there are two little dots, it's its broad sound. It's going ah, A, ah. Okay, let's look at our next vowel. Can you give me the two sounds? E, right? Is there another sound for E? No. This vowel only has two sounds. So there is no broad sound for my E. Now let's look at my next one. Think about how we learned this. I, E, ya. I, E, ya. Right? Do you remember how we learned that? We're only going to talk about the first two sounds. Okay? Let's look at my I. Since it's a short sound, what am I going to do with it? What am I going to put over the top? I. Smiley face. Nice. And what am I going to put over my I? A long line. See what I just did? Now let's back up. I forgot to do my E. So my E first sound is eh, right? It's that smiley face sound, so I'm going to put the smiley face. And my E is the long line. Let's go on to our last two vowels that we're going to talk about today. Give me the three sounds of O. Do you hear it? O, U. So how am I going to mark my first O sound, which is the short sound? O, ah. It's a smiley face. How am I going to mark its name, which is its long sound? O. How am I going to mark its third sound, which is the broad sound? I'm going to do the same as I did with my A, two dots. Last one. Excuse me. Let's do our sounds for U. U, oo, Now, if you remember right, the oo and the U in the middle there are both long sounds. But then my last sound, all of you love to do because you get to go, that is my broad sound. So I'm going to mark it with two dots. My short sound, I'm going to mark with my smiley. And then my middle sound, which is my long sound, there's two of them. There's either U or oo. I'm going to mark with a long line. Does this make sense? Thumbs up if you understand. Short sound, smiley. Long sound, line. Broad sound, or third sound, is the two little dots. Now notice, only three of our vowels have a third or broad sound that we're going to even mark. Okay. Now inside of your notebook, if you turn to page 65 of your student workbook, on the top, you're going to notice some vowels. And all of the vowels have little markings over the top. I want you to get that out right now. Page 65. Excuse me, did I say 35? 65. Now I blew mine up. See how I blew mine up? So it's very, very big. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take each column. So I'm going to give you a sound that I'm thinking of in the first column. Take your pencil, and whatever sound you hear, I want you to circle it. Mr. Slates, how do I know? How do I know? Look at your symbols. If it's the short sound, it's the smiley. If it's the long sound, it's a line. And if it's the broad sound, it's the 2 little dots. Okay? You ready for column 1? So only focus on these 3. I'm thinking of a phonogram, and it makes the sound. So circle which one of these you think makes the sound based on the symbol and the phonogram. Okay, you should have circled this one. Nice. Give yourself a pat on the back if you did that. Excellent. Go to your next column. Do you notice how they all have smiley faces? That means it's all the broad sounds. Careful of this one. Careful of this one. Okay, I want you to go ahead and circle the one that goes ah. Ah. Which one of these 3 goes ah? You should have circled the middle one because of the 2 dots. Now some of us hear our first sound of O very similarly to our last sound of A, don't we? Okay? But A is a, ah. So the broad sound is ah. The first sound of O is a little different. It's on, aw, like on. Okay, go to this column. I want you to circle the one that goes E. E. This is pretty simple, right? You should have circled this one. And in your last column, I want you to circle the one that goes U or oo. Pretty easy, right? It's this one right here. Okay, now I want you to pause a minute, and I want everyone to think of someone in your group that you can read all the sounds to. Not just the ones that are circled, but all the sounds. So you need to think carefully. Watch as I do it. So you're going to go aw, eh, because those are all short sounds. Then in the middle column, it's all the broad sounds, the third sound. So it's ah, ooh. And then here we've got a short sound ah and a long sound e. And this is you and or U and oo and A. See how I just read them all? Go ahead and take a minute to read them all to someone in your group. Can you tell who I am? Any guesses? I'll give you a hint. He always hides in these big pictures with all these things. And you're supposed to find him. Can you tell who I am? I'm Waldo, right? Where's Waldo? So today we're going to talk about the broad A, specifically about the broad A. We've already talked about how vowels can make 3 sounds. The A can go a, ah. The O can go o, oo, and the U can go u, oo, Those last sounds are called the broad sounds, but we're going to focus specifically on A today. So I have some words that all have A in them. I'm going to read them to you, and then I'm going to put them really close to the camera. And I want you to pause, and as a class or as a group, I want you to look at the words and see if you notice a pattern. I've put some letters in L to hopefully help you. You ready? Here's your words. All, water, want, wall, all right, wash, water. Oops, there's water twice, isn't it? And also. Look at those words for a minute. Do you notice how the A in all those words is making its third sound? It's going ah. So I'm going to put it closer to the camera, and I want you as a class to see if you can figure out why are all of these making an ah sound. And it's going to lead us to a rule. Can you see them all? Here we go. Okay, so you should have paused for a minute to see if you can figure out the rule. So did anyone figure out the rule? Because there is a rule. Where do you notice, or what do you notice about all of the A's in these words? Do you notice that all the A's in these words come after a W or before an L? Did you notice that? And some of them come after a W and before an L in the exact same word, which leads us to a rule. So I put it on a white card. We have blue cards for all of our rules, right? But this one's on a white card on purpose because I'm all in red and my red is in the back. And so I wanted you to be able to see it. So look at this rule. Do you see the A with 2 dots over the top? Remember, when there's 2 dots over the top of a vowel, it's making its broad sound. And in the case of A, it's going ah. Now let's skip this top one and focus on this. Do you see how the A is after the W and before the L? So here's the rule that you need to know. A will oftentimes make an ah sound after a W or before an L. We're going to call this the Waldo rule. Do you hear the word Waldo, like in Where's Waldo? Do you hear that? Now think about it. What letter do you think it is that's making that ah sound in Waldo? Raise your hand if you have a guess. It's an A. Yeah, it's an A. And think of the word Waldo. What sound are you hearing at the beginning of Waldo? You're hearing a W, which is made by the W, of course, right? So the word Waldo, the A is going ah, or its third sound, ah, because it's followed by a W, and actually it's before an L too, Waldo. So the reason all of these are making their ah sound is because they're after a W or before an L. Thumbs up if that makes sense. We're going to call this the Waldo rule. The Waldo rule, okay? Now let's look at this first one though. You see the first one? That just has a blank and then the broad A. So Mr. Slates, what does this have to do with anything? The A will often say ah at the end of a word as well. So listen to these words. Sofa, yoga, Yoda. Now, is that really how I say them? Do I really say Yoda or do I say Yoda? Do I really say yoga or do I say yoga? Do I really say sofa or do I say sofa? Do you notice how all of those words, when I said them with the broad ah, I said them like that because they end in an A. Yoda is ya-o-da, ah. It's an A. Master Yoda, it ends in an A. Now, it ends in an A, but most of the time, those end A's, guess what? It's back to, oh, our lazy schwa. They make a schwa sound. But when your teacher goes to help you to spell them, just pretend you want to spell Yoda. They're not going to go ya-o-da, because then you're going to write a U, of course. They're going to make that ah sound, that broad ah sound, so you know that it's an A. Does that make sense? So let's go over our Waldo rule. So say A says ah at the end of a word. A says ah at the end of a word. And A says ah after a W and before an L. A says ah after a W and before an L, which is why we're going to call this the Waldo rule.